Hey guys, Hackersploit here, back again with another video. Really excited to be back. And apologies for the delay between uploads. As you know, we've been dealing with a lot of issues with the YouTube community guideline strikes. But I think we've finally gotten them sorted now, so we can actually resume our, our daily uploads. So you should be expecting anywhere from 3 to 4 videos a week. Really excited to be back, as I said, and welcome to this video. So this video is going to be focused on cloud security. More specifically cloud reconnaissance, because as you know, this is going to be a continuation of the penetration testing bootcamp where we left off with vulnerability scanning. We also took a very deep look at Nmap scanning, or running scans with Nmap and using the scripting engine. And a lot of you have been requesting videos on reconnaissance, on reconnaissance on cloud or on cloud platforms, specifically things to do with S3 or S3 buckets on AWS. So we're going to be using flaws.cloud. Now, flaws.cloud is a challenge website. It's essentially like a CTF, but not really, in that it offers you, challenges that help you learn various vulnerabilities within AWS, components like S3, etc. Right? So this is focused on finding misconfigurations, and it can be very useful in bug bounties, as that's primarily the reason why a lot of you are actually asking. So if we just take a look at the brief description here, you can see it tells us for the scope, everything is run out of a single AWS account, and all challenges are subdomains of flaws.cloud. So level 1 pertains the following. So this level is buckets of fun, and buckets has actually been encapsulated by 2 asterisks. See if you can find the first subdomain. So our job here is going to be to find the first subdomain. So we're not going to be using the hints because I'll just take you through my own workflow, which I think actually works quite well. So let's get started, right? So I'll open up my terminal. The first thing we want to do is just identify the IP address for this particular site, right? So we're just going to use the host command, and we'll paste in the URL there. My bad. Let's get rid of the HTTP there, and we just hit enter, and we get the IP address, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to identify, what exactly what the hosting or DNS situation is exactly. As it says over here, everything is being run out of AWS. So that means we can expect the DNS or the name servers to actually point to AWS, or to AWS name servers. So we can say DNS recon d and flaws.cloud, right? And we can hit enter, and that's going to enumerate. And as I suspected, it points back to the AWS name servers. So if we just copy the actual IP here, and I'll just give that a few seconds to complete enumeration. There we are. So we don't get anything apart from the name servers. So if I open up and paste in the IP here, the IP redirects, right, to aws.amazon.com/S3, which means the website is being hosted on an S3 bucket. Right, so we pretty much know that already. Now, what we can do now is we can actually perform a reverse DNS lookup to find the actual URL of the bucket. So we can use NS lookup, right, and we just paste in the IP right over here. And immediately, once we hit enter, we get the the actual name here. So S3 website, US West 2, Amazon AWS.com. So let's just copy that. I want to explain a few things here. So I'll just paste that into my URL, and again, it redirects to that particular URL. Now, we can actually access the website through this particular URL, and all we need to do is just say, flaws.cloud .s3 website, right? So S3 website is used for hosting websites, and we just need to add the domain as the prefix, okay? Which is great. So what we can do now, as I said, is because we know it's running on S3, we can just test this and try and access and try and see whether the bucket name is the same as the domain name. So we can get rid of this here. And, it also gives us the region, which is US West 2, which can be great for additional enumeration or access using AWS CLI, which I'll actually touch upon. So I'm just going to hit enter. And you can see it actually gives us the bucket, and we are able to read the contents of the bucket. So this is the first misconfiguration. So that means anyone in the public can read the contents of the bucket, which means fundamentally, if a website is being hosted on an S3 bucket, I can access the content of the web server, so to speak, or the actual contents of the website. So you can see we have hint1.html, hint2.html, hint3, well, we don't have hint4, but we have index.html. We also have the logo, robots.txt, and we get a secret here, right? So that looks like this is probably going to give us the subdomain, but we can't be too sure. So if we try and access the contents of this particular file, of this particular HTML file, it tells us exactly what we want to know, which is a level 2 can be found at the following. It gives us the subdomain, right? So we're not going to be taking a look at level 2. I just want to take you through various tools that will automate this process, or that can actually help you automate this process. So again, we will touch upon each of these components as we move along. As I said, the first thing we can do is we can actually try and access the contents using AWS CLI. Or the AWS command line interface. Now, you need to make sure after you install the AWS command line interface utility that you enter in your access key and your secret access key, I believe is what it's called, which allow you to actually navigate around AWS or to access resources on AWS. So you can create a free account. It doesn't cost anything, and I'll be taking you through that as we move along. All right. So what I can do is I can say AWS. Right, and we then want to access S3. So we want to list the contents off. We then provide the S3 bucket name, and that is going to be flaws.cloud. By the way, if you're not familiar with how buckets work, the actual bucket name is listed right over here. Okay, so that should list the contents, and but we don't actually want to disable signing a request. So we just say no sign request, like so, and we hit enter, and that should dump the contents. Well, not dump, it will actually just display them. We'll take a look at dumping the contents of S3 buckets shortly. All right, so we're able to get the contents, and in this particular case we get the subdomain. So this is where the whole CTF aspect comes. Of course, when you'll be working in the wild, or when you'll be trying to find misconfigured buckets in the wild, of course, the data in here might be useful data. So the next logical step will be, trying to access it, trying to delete it. Well, not really delete it. You're not really a malicious hacker. But yeah, let's take a look at some of the automation tools. One of them is Lazy S3, I believe, which is written by Namsec, which is a great tool that actually, performs brute forcing on, AWS buckets using different permutations. Of course, it really is very, very simple. All you need to do is say Ruby lazy s3.rb, which is, of course, a Ruby extension, and the company. So in this particular case, we have the domain, which, we can actually use. So I already have this cloned on my desktop under cloud, and it's under lazy s3. And all we need to do now is just say lazy s3rb, and we say flaws.cloud, right? Hit enter, and it's already found the first bucket, which is flaws.cloud. As I said, we will already be able to do that manually, and we know that it's being hosted on an S3 bucket. And now the next logical step is to access the S3 bucket, which we already have done over here, and we've taken a look at how to use the AWS command line interface to do the same thing. The next thing that I want to highlight is going to be the process of scanning for permissions, for bucket permissions, and how to dump the contents of the actual bucket. All right, so for that, we're going to use S3 Scanner. All right, so S3 Scanner, again, is another open source tool, really, really great tool that allows you to scan for open S3 buckets and dump their contents. Now, this also works. The great thing I like about this particular utility is it also works for other cloud service providers, for example, DigitalOcean. We also have, let's see, DreamHost, etc. Right? So you can go through the documentation. It'll give you an idea of how to use the tool. I already have it installed. Installing it is fairly simple. It comes as a Python 3 module, so you can easily start it up using the following command. So Python 3 module S3 scanner, and we already know the bucket name. The first thing we can do is, of course, here again, scan AWS buckets listed in a file with 8 threads. We don't want to do that. We are just trying to enumerate information from this particular AWS bucket. So S3 scanner dump, we then specify the bucket name. And we also need to provide the dump directory if we are dumping the contents. So again, using it is fairly simple. In this particular case, it looks like we were able to find another bucket, but it looks like that's a 404, which means one of two things, or a few things really. Let's actually try that out while we're at it. So, we'll just get rid of that, paste that in there, and there we are. So no such bucket exists. Yeah, that makes sense. Or at least, well, we'll get to that when we get to that. I don't want to give away too much right now. Okay, so take a step back, and I'll just go into my desktop here. So we'll just take another step back. Right, so Python 3 module is S3 scanner, right? And what we want to do firstly is not really dump. We want to actually scan. So we're going to say scan, and then we say bucket is flaws.cloud. And do we need to provide anything else? Any other information? I don't think so. That should give us the actual permissions for that particular bucket. There we are. So we get the permissions there. So we can see that it tells us the bucket exists. The authorized users and all users have the ability to read, right? So that's really basic enumeration in regards to the permissions, the access permissions. Now, if you want to dump the contents, all you need to do is just say dump, and that should be good. No, we have to provide the dump directory. So I think that is, where's that dump directory? There we are. So dump directory, I'm just going to do this on my desktop, and S3 dump, already created a directory, and I'll hit enter, and that is going to dump the contents of this particular S3 bucket. So give that a few seconds, and it should dump the contents right for us to actually access. Looks like it didn't. It actually dumped it. Let's see whether we actually dumped it within S3 dump. Nothing within there. That's weird. Let's try and run that one more time, and I'll just hit enter. Did I forget to use the / there? Yes, I did. So it actually added that as a prefix to the file names, which is a mistake that can happen. And we'll check the directory now, and there we are. We get the contents of the files, and that's really as simple as it gets. So just to summarize what we've taken a look at, the challenge involved identifying the S3 bucket in question. We can do that manually or automatically. Manually, by performing reverse DNS lookup and actually identifying the architecture or how the website is being hosted. In our particular case, we're actually lucky to have the website being hosted on the S3 bucket itself. Of course, in many other cases, if we actually just go back here, is this the actual logo? You can say view image. You can see that if this site was not hosted on an S3 bucket, the actual S3 bucket endpoint URL, which I think I've covered, but I'll be taking you through that. Will actually be listed here as the directory to the image resource. In our case, it's already doing this because flaws.cloud is hosted on an S3 bucket. All right, so that was a mouthful. I think we've covered quite a bit in regards to performing brute force, actually using brute forcing to determine S3 buckets or on a company domain or the company name itself. And of course, we'll be taking a look at all other cloud hosting providers like DigitalOcean, Azure as well. But for now, I just wanted to cover the whole idea of scanning S3 buckets for misconfigurations, how to list out the permissions, the access permissions, and of course, how to dump out the contents, and a little bit of how to use the AWS command line interface. We'll be taking a look at the next at the next challenge, which I believe we can just try and access that URL here. So there we are, and paste that in there. We'll be accessing level 2, which deals with, there we are. So it tells us on AWS, you can set up S3 buckets with all sort of permissions and functionality, including using them to host static files, which is what I just demonstrated. A number of people accidentally open them up with permissions that are too loose, just like how you shouldn't allow directory listings on web servers, which is a great analogy to the problem that we're actually experiencing. So, you know, if you have an Apache web server and indexing is allowed, that means that people can actually browse the contents of the web server or the root directory of the web server, right? So there we are. And it'll give us an, you know, some examples of this particular problem. So for example, we have one on Shopify, which there we are. There's a report on HackerOne that actually outlines this particular problem. So these techniques are real. You can actually use them when, you know, performing your bug bounty hunting. So there we are. Amazon AWS S3 bucket content is public, and I think they might have fixed this already. Of course they have. So there we are. Access denied. And read and write permissions to S3 buckets for Shopify again. Right, and to avoid this mistake, it gives you the, you know, it actually outlines that. So the next level is fairly simple, fairly similar, with a slight twist. You're going to need your own AWS account for this. You just need the free tier. So we'll be taking a look at this and moving along with this particular series of challenges. That being said, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for supporting the channel during this particular period, as we've been dealing with a lot of issues with YouTube. If you want to support the channel and the project, you can do so on Patreon. So patreon.com/hackersploit. And I will be seeing you in the next video. I just want to take a moment to thank all our Patreons at patreon.com/hackersploit for all the support. Your support and help is truly appreciated. You keep us making newer and fresher and better content. So I just want to say thank you to all the Patreons. So thank you, Murph the Surf, Daniel Bork, Jonathan Kyle, Adam Mack, Jamal Guillory, Dafim Bari, Jeremy Nikolai, Mary Hara, Max Chow, Dustin Umpress, Michael Hubbard, and Jerry Speds.